Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello Rank Squad and welcome to Ranks FC and Champions League takeaway for the second time this week. My name's Jack Collins and I'll be your host today. And joining me across the water all the way from San Diego is Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
Hello, mate. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, not quite as entertaining today. Yeah, wasn't quite as thrill a minute from the games I watched. But yeah, there's a lot to discuss today for sure.
Only 28 goals tonight, a drop of 15 from yesterday's 43. I actually think in some ways it's quite rude of the lads to give us the main course before the starter, which is how this kind of felt in many ways. But alas, there were plenty of entertaining storylines in the same way. And we're going to start with 2 5-1s. And you know what? If there's 2 5-1s on a match week, normally you'd be like, oh, what a start to the proceedings. What a good way to get stuck in. But it was an interesting one in two very separate ways. And I know that you've done Chelsea's 5-1 win over Ajax at Stamford Bridge. So I think that's where we're going to start today.
Yeah, cool. I mean, this should have been a better game than it ended up being. It's actually a bit of a non-event in the end because of the way that it ended up opening up. But yeah, Chelsea 5, Ajax 1, which is a lovely result. But it's hard to analyse a game that sees the opponents down to 10 men after 15 minutes.
Mate, I did Paphos against Kairat Almaty on a red card after 4 minutes yesterday. It's not that bad.
Yeah, true. No goals either for you. But look, I feel like this red card, it is a red, like he's never going to get away with it once the ref looks at it. It wasn't like so basically what happens is there's a ball there to be won and Kenneth Taylor kind of goes in sliding and he gets Bonanotte kind of on the calf/ankle, and it's ultimately a dangerous tackle, and he's not got a leg to stand on. Woohoo! But he didn't mean it. He didn't go over the ball. He kind of went to the side of the ball. He's just not completely in control. Like sometimes I just wish you could be like, right, is everybody okay if I don't give the red here? Like, because this is going to totally wreck the game. Now, Maresca wouldn't have been okay with that because as soon as he'd seen the replay of the challenge, he was absolutely berating the fourth official. Like, he's got to go.
And he's perfectly within his rights to do so, I probably should add.
Yeah, but it wasn't like, it was just like Taylor himself, like he was kind of dejected. He was like, he knew, as soon as he went and looked at the screen, he knew what was coming. It just ruined the game. So couple of minutes after he was sent off, Chelsea took the lead. Marguerite scores, celebrates his goal to become Chelsea's youngest Champions League goal scorer. Well, that record didn't last very long. We'll talk about that in a second. Caicedo made it 2-0 not long after. He can definitely do no wrong at the moment. Starts his game at right back and still manages to get his name on the score sheet. He's in a bit of a good place at the moment. And so you're like looking at it and you're thinking, well, they're absolutely home and hosed here. 2-0 up after 27 minutes. Ajax down to 10. There's also a great moment, mate, before I talk about what else happened. It didn't really matter because Jamie Gittins was offside. But he does this piece of back control. He brings this ball down early in the game. The ball comes over the top to try and find him. And he deliberately turns his back on the ball and brings it down with his back. It's unbelievable. Like, it was my
Dennis
favourite.
Adoy.
Yeah, but much better version of what Dennis Adoy did. It was completely controlled and flowed too. Like, it was unbelievable. I'm so annoyed he was offside because it was brilliant and no one will really talk about it now. But it was in the early stages. If you want to like see it, you might, I don't know, maybe someone's already picked it up on socials. I assume they will because it's unbelievable.
I did want to add one thing, that my favourite moment of this early on was obviously Kenneth Taylor, formerly known as Zenith Taylor on this podcast, one for the old heads there. What happened when he got sent off, I don't know if you saw this, but Stamford Bridge erupting in a chorus of red card again, ole ole, I thought was absolutely sensational from the Chelsea faithful. I got to put it out there. It really, really made me laugh.
Yeah, I didn't hear that because I watched with the sound off. That's why I didn't hear that. Weghorst got Ajax potentially back into the game. Obviously, a bit of a laughing stock in English football without Weghorst, but he threatened to give Ajax a way back into the game, and just after the hour mark. But then Chelsea scored 2 penalties of their own before half time. Enzo Fernandez takes the first one, and then Esteval steps up to take the second one. And very unfairly, because poor old Mark Guiu can't even get into half-time celebrating his little landmark moment of being the... Didn't even get through the first half.
One of the penalties was to the left, the other one was to the right. That made me really happy. And also the keeper goes both the right way for both of them.
Yeah.
And they both just beat him because they're both really good strikes. Credit where it's due.
Yeah, but I think the fact that that goal record lasted for like half an hour. It was my probably favourite moment apart from the back control in that game. It was all pretty much done then by half time. Tyreek George made it 5-1. Ajax have had a trouncing. Their fans were not happy at all with their manager. The only thing at this point, I did have the sound on. I'm not sure why, but I did have the sound on at this point. And he substituted, as his reaction to going down to 10 men, a little while after, he took off Oscar Gluck. And the fans went mental. Like, the Ajax fans were fuming. And they really let it be known. And they were zooming in on the fans. And maybe this is why I turned the sound on, actually, because I think I was trying to figure out what was going on. So they were talking about the discontent in the stand with that decision by Heitinger, which he's going to struggle to defend now that they've lost the game 5-1. Obviously, a bit of a fan's favourite. He was gone, and Chelsea were involved in another game with a red card, but this time it all worked out in their favour.
Yeah, I mean, look, Ajax fans have plenty of reason to be pretty discontent at the moment in terms of how things are. They're fourth in the Eredivisie. They lost 2-0 to AZ Alkmaar at the weekend, and that allowed AZ to jump ahead of them. Johnny Heitinger not doing a particularly good job, I think, in terms of what we've seen from them so far. 4 wins, 4 draws, and a loss in terms of what they've done domestically. And in the Champions League, it's been a little bit of a disaster in terms of what we've seen from them so far. So, I can understand it. I think the thing is that I don't want to lay this at the door of any Ajax fans, because I think that quite a lot of Ajax fans were quite pleased with what happened with Farioli last year. And although obviously the title got away from them and they definitely should have seen it out and been able to get over the line in that regard, there was still a sense that he was moving the club in the right direction. Now, the people at the top of the club decided that wasn't good enough. I think part of it was Farioli just being like, I can't cope with the fact that I've kind of thrown this away in the last minutes. But you look at what he's put together at Porto at the start of this season over in the Primera, and you're starting to think, maybe they should have hung on to him or fought a little bit harder to hang on to him in that regard. Because, what we've seen from them in the Champions League so far, they're hammered 5-1 today by Chelsea. They're hammered 4-0 by Marseille a couple of weeks ago at the Velodrome, and then they lose 2-0 at home in that first game to Inter. So it's been a really, really disappointing start to life back in the Champions League from Ajax's perspective. And look, I don't think, obviously, the game today was a bit of a weird one in that the early red card really sets them up for failure. But to be honest, with 11 men, I don't think they would have beaten Chelsea today. And look, it's another one for Lorenzo Maresca and Chelsea, and they're on a really good streak of results here in regards to how Chelsea have put it together in recent weeks. Yes, the game against Liverpool, they find the late winner and that gives them a boost, but there's an international break. You've got to come out the other side of that. The first half against Nottingham Forest, I thought at the weekend, Chelsea weren't brilliant. And actually the fact that they were able to wrest it back at half time and put together that second half performance was really impressive. And then today from the get-go, Mark Guiu starting up front, I think is a massive boost for Chelsea. And I think the way that they play when they do have a number 9 leading the line, I thought Esteval was a lot of fun behind him. I thought Buonanotte did quite well as well. But this is a young Chelsea side. And yes, circumstances do matter in regards to exactly how this all plays out. But, we've seen Jorel Hato play at left back before, and it's been a bit of a, get Cucurella back in there at half time. We've seen, this front three behind the striker play in different combinations, sure, but like Jamie Gittins hasn't really lit it up since he came into Chelsea. And I'm not saying that he kind of dominated the game tonight or anything in that regard, but this was a risky and quite, youthful formation and setup from what Maresca's done. And they've come out of it on the right side of it, sure, but also being able to rest a few key players as well. That's got to be a good thing from a Chelsea perspective in general, I think.
Yeah, the young lineup will definitely make headlines, and it's a good moment for them to start bringing these people into the team and getting them to make an impact. Obviously, they've spent a lot of money putting this project together and having a team.
Sure, but look at the substitutions, right? How many of them? So Trevor Chalobah, Tyreek George, Achiampong, Reggie Walsh. 4 of the 5 subs are academy products. Like that's a great thing from a Chelsea perspective.
Yeah, no, it is. But this is, you'd like to think so, right? That like this is the whole point of having a extremely expensive project that you're putting together. So let's hope for their sake it does start to pay off. It was a good evening to be able to try and test this, and the experiment paid off.
Yeah, 100%. Good. All things good. All things coming up blue, I think, at Stamford Bridge at the moment. Somewhere where it hasn't been coming up their way is Liverpool, obviously coming into their game against Eintracht Frankfurt, 4 losses on the spin and a very dispiriting one to Manchester United at the weekend at Anfield. So going to Eintracht felt like a bit of a potential banana skin in many ways. Liverpool overcame that relatively comfortably in the end, winning 5-1 against Eintracht. And you know what, Dean? I quite like the way that Liverpool set up in this one. We saw a 4-4-2. We saw Hakpo on the left of that. We saw Florian Wirtz on the right of it. And actually, on paper, I was like, ooh, that looks a little bit risky. But what actually happened was Florian Wirtz, or at least for the first 10 minutes, what actually happened was Florian Wirtz drifted into the middle of the park. And actually, we saw Jeremy Frimpong flying up that right-hand side to make a 3 at the back. Andy Robertson tucking in a little bit and making sense of it a bit more from a defensive perspective for Liverpool. And that was ended quite early on because Jeremy Frimpong went off with a hamstring injury. That's a real blow for him, especially given the fact that it's a reoccurring injury. But I thought they started well in those first 10 minutes. Eintracht had some of the ball, but it felt like Liverpool were the team in the ascendancy. And at that moment, Frimpong goes off and you're thinking, okay, what does Conor Bradley do? Do they stick with the same shape? It didn't look quite the same after that change was made. And despite the fact that they had all of that early, pressure and possession, they fall behind this opener from Eintracht Frankfurt. Wirtz dispossessed in the middle of the park, and Frankfurt break. Mario Götze feeds Rasmus Christensen, and his finish is really lovely across the goal, in off the far post. And you're starting to go, ooh, is this uncomfortable? Is this now uncomfortable for Liverpool? They're behind again in a game, and you're looking at it and saying 4 losses in a row is bad, but this was an opportunity to reset. And suddenly, despite starting the game well, you're behind again. But they hit back. And actually, I thought that the way that they found their equaliser was really interesting because it was a little bit of a carbon copy in many ways of the Eintracht goal. They were the ones that dispossessed their hosts at this point, and Andy Robertson with a lovely ball through to Hugo Ekitike, who gets in behind and finishes against his former club. No celebrations for the big man, despite the fact that that was a big goal for Liverpool. And minutes later, they start to get into their groove. And, interestingly, Liverpool scored 2 from set pieces. I've seen a lot of Liverpool fans in the comments being like set piece FC to Arsenal down the years. And yet, a header from Virgil van Dijk, getting away from his marker really well to head in Cody Hakpo's corner that makes it 2-1. And almost moments after that, another corner, Soboslai's delivery headed home by Ibrahima Konate. And at that moment, you're like, everybody cool off. Everybody kind of relax, breathe. It's going to be okay. Because I think at 3-1 up, especially considering that Eintracht are the kind of team that not only do score a lot of goals themselves, but leaves themselves open defensively. This is the third 5-1 in a row that they've had in the Champions League. So we know that this is something that there is in there, both for and against, we should probably add. But, it has been teams have been able to get advantage of them. And Liverpool then take control in the second half. Isak substituted at halftime. They go from that 4-4-2, if you will, to a more traditional Liverpool 4-3-3 because Chiesa comes on. And what we see in the second half is 2 assists for Florian Wirtz. He firstly puts the ball on a plate for Cody Hakpo to tap in to make it 4-1. And then it's slightly more of a Tom Carroll assist for the 5th. He lays it up to Dominik Szoboszlai, who fires one in from sort of 25 yards or so into the far corner to make it 5. And Liverpool kept pushing, actually. They could have found a 6th and a 7th towards the end of the game. Those ones were either denied. I thought Zetterer in the Eintracht Frankfurt goal, despite conceding 5 times, actually had a pretty good game in terms of the way that he stopped a load of chances, especially early on and then late on, to make it, to keep it open first half and then to stop it becoming a bit of a drubbing in the second. It's not often you praise a goalkeeper who's conceded 5 times, but I actually thought that he had a pretty good game and dealt with what he could deal with over the course of 90 minutes. But you know what? A sigh of relief, I think, from a Liverpool perspective. They were able to make substitutions. Salah came on late after not starting. It was something that we know that Liverpool fans, especially on our Patreon, etc., on Monday, were calling for Salah to just dropped out and allowed to find his rhythm again. So him coming on for 10 minutes in the end of a game that was already done and dusted, I think is a good sign. I thought that Arne Slot being able to rotate and challenge some of his favourites and actually see something a little bit different was interesting from that perspective. Ekitike on the score sheet again, and 2 assists for Wirtz. I think if you could have offered this to a Liverpool fan before the game, they would have been delighted to not only have seen some of these players starting to come into their own in their own right, but also the fact that ultimately it was comfortable and they didn't need a last-minute winner to win it. 3 points were the most important thing, but actually having a game that they were in control of for most of the 90 minutes would have been a big relief to, I think, a lot of the Liverpool faithful.
Yeah, definitely needed to be done after losing 4 in a row. I did say on the Patreon the other day, somebody wrote in and said, you look at Liverpool's next game, looks tough, Frankfurt and Brentford away. I was like, do me a favour. That's not hard. It's Liverpool. These are Premier League champions who just spent £400 million. You go and beat Frankfurt and Brentford and you put things right. And they've gone and done the first part of that, and now I expect them to go and beat Brentford 3-0 or something at the weekend, because that's what should be expected of a team of this magnitude and this stature. Like that, I am genuinely expecting them to bounce back in a similar vein. I'll be interested to see what he chooses to do up front, though, because I also said the other day that I find extremely harsh not to be picking Ekitike now. Like, he is the one that has been successful out of the summer signings and the one that deserves his place in the team. So will Slot be brave enough to start Ekitike ahead of Isak or ahead of Salah or whoever? Let's wait and see. Like, I haven't seen this game yet, obviously, so I don't know exactly how he played, but he obviously scored. So let's wait and see.
He was excellent.
Yeah, well, there you go. So I think at this point, you've got to just play everybody that's in any sort of form. And Ekitike, almost a guarantee to go against Brentford, if you ask me.
Well, I wonder if they go with this 4-4-2 again.
Do you?
Because, you can play them both together. There's 2 strikers up there. Ekitike is a little bit more of a drift man. He's able to drop into that number 10 space. He occupies wide areas, all of those things. But also, just to point something out, it is, today, the 22nd of October, as we're recording this. This is the first game all season long that Liverpool have won comfortably. Like, it's the first game they haven't needed a late winner or ended up losing. Like, you look at actually what's happened. You look at all the way back to the 10th of August, Community Shield, Crystal Palace win that on penalties. The Bournemouth game, first game of the season, they were drawn back to 2-2, and it took 2 late moments to make that 4-2. They find the Rio and Gamoja winner against Newcastle in the 97th minute. The 1-0 game against Arsenal, very even until the Szoboszlai free kick. They get a late penalty against Burnley. They win 3-2 against Atletico Madrid, which I think was their best performance of the season, perhaps up to tonight in general, but actually still needed something after Atleti drag it back to 2-2 somehow. There's a 2-1 win over Everton. And then you're looking at it and saying, okay, so 2-1 over Southampton, 2-1, they lose to Crystal Palace, they lose 1-0 to Galatasaray, they lose to Chelsea, they lose to Manchester United. This is the first one you look at and say, wow, Liverpool were comfortable in the 85th minute of a game, which is just nuts considering actually the ups and downs of the season so far.
Yeah, and we have to follow trends. We have to follow what we genuinely believe a club is, and that's on the frequency of events. So this is kind of a blip in terms of that. But for Liverpool, they'll consider this should be the norm. And that's what they now have to go and prove in their next game at Brentford, in the next home game against Crystal Palace. They have to start putting things right and making sure that they are in command, even when they're 2-0 up, that they are in command of a game and they're not letting clubs come back into it. The thing is, the Liverpool have lost their fear factor this season. Now, maybe Frankfurt had a bit more of that fear factor, but in the Premier League, it hasn't existed so much. this season so far. And I don't think Brentford will hold much fear. I don't think Crystal Palace will hold much fear. So let's see how that pans out, because I do think that will be different in that respect. But this is a really important win. A sigh of relief for Arne Slot to not go 5 defeats in a row for sure. And yeah, let's see if it means that they are getting back on track.
Liverpool versus Jordan, Brian Henderson and Quaveen Kelleher and Sepp van den Berg at the weekend, who will know exactly what this team are about. So keep an eye on that one. Right, we're going to take a little break there. When we come back, we're going to discuss some interesting games, including Tottenham's draw against Monaco and Real Madrid's win over Juventus. Stick with us here on Ranks FC. Welcome back to Champions League Takeaway here on Ranks FC, where I want to take things over to Monaco. Tottenham Hotspur, the visitors to the King Louis II Stadium tonight, Dean. And another performance from Spurs, which I think fans might want to forget.
Oh, mate, definitely. Tottenham have had one shot on target, I think, in 90 minutes against an average side from Ligue 1. Like, that ain't good. It's not good. And they were on the back foot for a lot of this game. They're lucky to get out of there at 0-0. And Thomas Frank should be very relieved. Monaco had so many chances in this game. Minamino came on as a sub with 20 minutes left and could have had a hat-trick.
Just scored a hat-trick, yeah.
Yeah, like literally. We're not exaggerating with that. Like, could have had a hat-trick of good chances. It was expected to be put at least one of them away or on target even. Just couldn't do it. Vicario, like Tottenham's man of the match by a mile. Like, he had a really good game. I know he hasn't always been perfect so far this season, and there's been some frustrations around him. But when Venom is at his best, he's great. And this was one of those nights, luckily for Tottenham. Made a couple of really good stops, one particularly towards the end from very close range. But Thomas Frank needs to sort this out, mate, because what's worrying is the style of the performances mixed with some technical ineptitude, really, in some key areas of the pitch. Look, Tottenham are still unbeaten in the Champions League, and Monaco are still looking for their first win in the Champions League. So that's confusing, because you definitely wouldn't believe that if you were an alien just landed here and watched this as your first ever game of soccer. But it's the way things are. In Kudus, they've got like an absolute star who never lets his performance levels drop. He's always good, right? And Odegaard on the other side, he's not quite as good as Kudus, but he was definitely a good outlet for him.
Tries to make things happen, doesn't he, Odegaard? Yeah. I really do like him.
Exactly. So they're still fine. Palhinha was fine, but there's too many around them that need to step it up. Bergval's getting singled out a lot here. Look, he hasn't played too much football recently, but look, I'll admit it wasn't one of his best days in possession of a ball. But I love Bergval. I think he's great, and I wouldn't be singling him out too much if I was a Spurs fan, because you don't want him feeling the pressure of that. The side just feels like it needs more of a spark. It feels like Thomas Frank hasn't fully got to grips with the personnel that he's got to choose from at the moment. He doesn't know what his best team is. He doesn't know what system to use. They're going to enter the transfer window. They'll definitely get a new attacking option in. But beyond that, they've also got the potential to sign one or two others as well. It'll be interesting to see where Frank wants the recruitment staff to prioritise. They're going through this at the moment behind the scenes and drawing up shortlists that they should be going for. But they need to find the perfect system and some sort of consistency. It's 1 win from 5 now. And I'll tell you what, I would not count on them improving that record against Everton at the weekend based on what we've seen here. Because I'd guess that Ndiaye, Dewsbury Hall, Grealish will put them to bed. Like, Monaco should have put them to bed. And look, Akliouche is a Tottenham target. Like, they're still actually looking at him. And he played here for Monaco. He's a smooth player, Akliouche. I
love watching him.
Really, really good player to watch. And he threatened to do some damage, and ultimately Monaco just, they couldn't finish their dinner here. Flo Balogun, I think we've seen why he's struggled at times as well. But ultimately, this is a good point for Tottenham, because it's one they didn't deserve. They spent much of the game penned in, which should not be the case against a team that's 7th in Ligue 1. But hey, that's where we're at. this is one of the reasons that Tottenham fans are still frustrated. They obviously thought once Ange was gone that they might see a team that expresses themselves a bit more, that imposes themselves on games a bit more while still having the back door shut. But they haven't got that. And I think it's a bit of a confusing time. So big job still ahead for Thomas Frank to turn this around.
Yeah, I mean, look, if they thought that Spurs were going to become a more attacking outlet under Frank than they were about Postecoglou, then I don't know what to tell you. I've also got a bridge to sell you. But like in terms of actually what we're seeing here, like I'm not 100% sure what Thomas Frank is trying to do. Now, you and I have discussed Spurs at length over on the Patreon, especially on a Monday. And the thing that our Spurs patrons keep coming back to is this double pivot of Bentancur and Palhinha, which, especially when Christian Romero isn't playing, looks like it doesn't have the ability or aptitude to play at the back. Now, that's not what Spurs signed Joao Palhinha for, right? They signed him to be a wrecking ball at the base of midfield, and you and I both have a big soft spot for Palhinha, right? Like 100% wonderful footballer. We know this. But he's not the most expressive of midfielders. He knows exactly what his job is, and his job is to destroy things and give the ball to players around him who are going to create. If you play him alongside Bentancur, you end up with this bizarre kind of double pivot where neither of them really want the ball. And Bergvall plays, which is something that Spurs fans were asking for, and I totally understand that. But they weren't asking for Bergvall instead of Xavi Simons. They were asking for him or Pape Matar instead of one of the two players at the base of the pivot so they could have something moving through midfield. I'm not 100% sure what Thomas Frank was trying to do with the back four. I assume he tried to put Archie Gray into there to give them a little bit more of an outball and someone who could kind of play out the back. It didn't really work from where I was standing, and it just felt like everything was a bit all over the place. Now, he moved into midfield later on, but that didn't really work either. I'm just not 100% sure that Thomas Frank is completely convinced about the defensive ability of this team and thus is trying to play more of a defensive shield in front of them in Bentancur and Palhinha. And actually what it's doing is really preventing Spurs from finding any opportunities to play through the middle of the park. And to be honest, it didn't really defensively sort them out here either. Now, I know they've got a clean sheet and they've come away with the point, and you can point at that and say, well, it did work to an extent. But I don't think on watching this game, and anyone who kind of spent their time watching the amount of opportunities that Monaco racked up over 90 minutes would argue that Spurs were very, very solid defensively either. And actually, it feels a bit like he's stuck between stations.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I'm starting to wonder with Thomas Frank is if he's just a little afraid. Sometimes when managers get a big job, they kind of play within themselves. They're scared to be as ambitious as they might have been elsewhere. And what we used to see from Thomas Frank at Brentford isn't what we're seeing right now, because he did used to play with a net element of risk. I don't feel like there's any element of risk in this Tottenham team
anymore. To himself to a point.
Well, yeah, exactly, because they're playing within themselves so much. It's like at times, and this was the same at the weekend, Tottenham fans are like, are we even trying to win this game? Or are we just trying not to lose this game? What are we actually aiming for here? It's like he just cannot face defeat. So he's just going to be like, okay, let's just contain them. Let's contain them. And you can see as soon as the other team wins possession, Frank's almost like panicking. He's gesturing on the sidelines at all times. And I get it. Like any coach feels a little bit like that in those moments because it's out of your control and you just want everything to look safe, especially if you're in a new job and you're trying to impose yourself in a club. You just don't want to lose. But ultimately, at Tottenham, this fan base wants their team to play on the front foot a bit. They want to see them express themselves. They want to see Kudus getting at people, getting in behind and scoring goals and like getting people off their seats. And like I say, that next test against Everton is a tough one because that's kind of exactly what Everton are moving towards right now under their philosophy under Moyes, who isn't playing with any pressure. It was like, F it, like I'm back here. I'm going to be different. I'm going to give this a go. I'm going to go with the low socks brigade and we'll see what we can do. And that's exactly the style of football that Tottenham fans are kind of craving. Like let these guys play. And you're just not seeing it at the moment. And to go to Monaco, it was to say, like, they're not a great team, mate. They're good. They're decent, but they're not great. Like, As I say, they're seventh.
They're also under new they're under new management.
Exactly.
Coglioni's come in there, like, as in this. If you were ever going to get a moment where you're like, let's just have a go at them before they get settled under a new management, this was the time. I feel like Thomas Frank is almost so scared of looking or kind of so frightened of being compared to Ange Postecoglou by letting the handbrake off that he's leaving the handbrake on far too much in the other way.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, you're not going to get anywhere with this. Like, look, Brentford weren't the most attacking team anyway. They weren't the most expressive team, but they were good in transition. They knew
had
how
game
to break
plans. And actually, to begin with, Frank felt like he had game plans. Like, look at PSG and those first games that Spurs came into, and you were like, wow, okay, he's executed game plans really well there. But it's almost like as soon as they come into a game where they should be the dominant force, those game plans kind of go out the window in lieu of control.
Yeah, I mean, look, maybe his argument would be that his structure at Brentford and the understanding at Brentford was better than what he's got now. It might be, like, because he worked with them for so long. He had individuals that he knew exactly how to work them, and he's now got to kind of replicate that format. Like, who's his Mbeumo, who's his Visser, who is Damsgaard, who's Sharda, whatever, right? And it feels like he's trying to do that. The difference is Brentford were always happy to finish in mid-table, and mid-table at Tottenham's only going to lead to one thing, and that's the sack. Right? Not straight away. Like, he's not going to get sacked this season for finishing mid-table. But ultimately, this is a team that's about to go big on investment. They've just won their first trophy in for ages. And now what? That's what everyone's like. Now what? Like, who are we signing next? Is Harry Kane coming back? Is this happening? Like, Harry Kane ain't coming back to this. No chance. Like, you're not going from playing the best football of his life at Bayern Munich to this at Tottenham. They've got to be 2 levels up from this, 3 levels up from this, if he's even going to consider it. So, yeah, a lot of work to be done from Thomas Frank to prove that he's not just a mid-table manager.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they should borrow Soccer Moses from Nashville SC. Let my people goal, I think, is probably the phrase I would use for most Spurs fans right now. Let's go quickly over to Real Madrid before we come back to Harry Kane and Bayern Munich. Real Madrid won 1-0 against Juventus in a bit of a strange game. Dean. This was kind of billed as one of the big ones of the night, and especially over at Real Madrid TV, etc. They were calling this a European Clasico. You know, this has been a Champions League final a couple of times, and it was really, really underwhelming for most of the game, to be honest. It was a bizarre first half here where almost nothing happened. Like, felt like Juve holding fire and defensively solid, Real Madrid just not clicking into gear in the way that maybe people would have hoped. I enjoyed Rory Smith's description of this as a phony war, which nobody needed to win. So it was a bit like, okay, let's just not lose this game. Real Madrid were on top, I thought, but without loads and loads to show for it. And, you know, it got to half time and it was a bit of a shrug, like in terms of what I was watching. There was lots of things going on, and especially with the drama at Stamford Bridge and at Liverpool at Eintracht, there was lots of things happening all at once. And then just this was going on at the same time. And every time you kind of look to it and be like, okay, you know, is anyone building anything? The answer was kind of just no. And like over the course of the first 45 minutes, it sprung into life a little bit at the start of the second half. Vlahovic, your man, should have scored top of the second half. He raced clear, held off Militao really well, but failed to beat Courtois. Now look,
so annoying.
Thibaut Courtois is a wonderful goalkeeper, and he's a very, very good one-on-one specialist.
Very, very big as well, yeah.
But also, if you've raced clear from the halfway line, and you know the most you've had to do is really kind of an arm off against a defender, you should have more time to kind of pick your angle and pick your spot.
Yeah, and you know, old school Vlahovic definitely would have backed on this.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Well, look, we saw Ismail Saibari do this against Napoli yesterday and just race clear and lift the ball over the keeper and absolutely no bother whatsoever. And Vlahovic should have done better here. And look, Madrid punished Juve a few minutes later. Vinicius Jr. doing some beautiful work, standing up his man, hitting the post, but Jude cleared it up and off they went. It needed someone to find that moment of magic. And it turns out it wasn't the goal scorer really, but the creator. And another moment for Vinicius in the Champions League. I think he needed that a little bit. Obviously a lot of bluster about what happened at the weekend against Getafe, where mostly I thought he was within his rights. Yeah, he's bought a free kick or two, but you know, if you're doing that against Getafe, I don't think they really have many legs to stand on in terms of being able to complain about it, considering the dark arts are really Bordalas' speciality. So I have a very little sympathy for Getafe about Vinicius winning a few fouls and winning a couple of yellows and red cards on the back of that. Look, there's a couple of moments. There's an outrageous block from Asensio at the death to deny Openda, who just thought he was guaranteed to score, I think. Thought he had a little bit more time than he did. But the amount of ground that Raul Asensio covers to find this block is absolutely outrageous in generality. And I look at it and think, wow, that's a man who is desperate to win in the Real Madrid shirt. Look, is Raul Asensio the best player in the world? No. Is he going to be the great centre-back that I think Real Madrid fans were hoping for last season? I'm not convinced. I think there's too many weaknesses to his game. But my God, he wants to play for this Real Madrid team. And in that kind of moment, you see what that desire does for a player. So I think you kind of look at it in that. I mean, Vinny Jr. is the difference ultimately. That gorgeous little dink away from the player, and he fires the shot off the post. Bellingham desperate to get on the end of it and taps it home. A nice moment for him after what was, I thought, a kind of subdued return to this team. The big save from Courtois and then that block from Asensio, that's ultimately the difference. And Real Madrid go into the Clasico not as comfortable as Barcelona after their 6-1 win over Olympiacos yesterday, but against an opposition that you would suggest are superior in Juventus. But I tell you what, Dean, that's 7 now in a row without a win for Igor Tudor at Juve. Now, they've only actually lost twice this season, and they've come back-to-back, Como at the weekend and then this one against Real Madrid. So everything with a little bit of a pinch of salt, but the fans are no happy with how things are going.
I mean, we obviously talked about him on the pod last week, save or sack, and
people laughed at me for including him.
Mate, it's more than ever since that episode. You were going to say on that episode, weren't you, that what our success rate is of predicting managers to lose their job.
Also sack him. He is not the answer.
He's just not the answer, is he? Like, this is it. Like, it feels like I've been following Gazzetta recently and their coverage of Juve just to try and get like a read of the situation. And every day they're basically just writing articles on who should come next.
I mean, look, I think the other thing is that there's the spectre of Raffaele Palladino in the wings, right? And obviously that's going to upset Fiorentina fans. I don't think he gives a much of a monkeys who's upsetting at this point, Palladino, considering he walked out of Fiorentina 3 days after signing a new contract or whatever it was. So, like, that wouldn't be great from that perspective, but I think that they will make a change because you look at it, and next up is Lazio, who have been pretty poor, I think, on all things considered over the course of the season. That's away from home at the Olimpico. I don't see Juve going and winning there. And I think you could, you end up with a couple of games' time is the derby della Mole against Torino. They lose that one, or they don't win that one. I don't think they need to lose. Thiago Motta was sacked for too many draws, not for losing too many games, for not winning enough games. And currently, it feels like Tudor is on a downward spiral. I think he was given a bit of grace because he came in at the halfway through last season and he tidied things up a little bit. But it just doesn't feel like it's going anywhere from where I'm standing right now.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think it's only a matter of time while they figure out who the next man is, that it feels like a dead man walking now.
Yeah, 100%. Nice moment for Jude, though. He played in a midfield 3 with Arda Güler, which I thought was interesting from Alonso, a more attack-minded midfield, Tchouaméni sitting at the base of it, and still managed to burst into box to find the goal, which was a nice moment for him. And actually, after a lot of chat, after a lot of discussion, especially here in the UK, about his role within England's squad and what that's going to be, to come back and score a Champions League goal, just a little reminder to be like, no, I ain't gone anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. He is in a difficult situation and I found it, even the way the Tuchel was talking about Bellingham to be a little bit strange, but I fully back this guy to turn things around in that sense and get himself back into the England picture. There's no better place to be than Real Madrid in terms of the stage that you're on, because as soon as you start playing well, your name is up in lights, you're impossible to avoid. And I hope that Bellingham grows out from here and his season starts to get back on track.
Yeah, well, we'll see how Real Madrid get on in that Clasico at the weekend. A lot riding on that game. Absolutely cannot wait. We'll take a little break there. And when we come back, we're going to be rounding up all the rest of the action. Stick with us here on Champions League Takeaway.
Welcome back to Ranks FC. And this is the part of the show where Jack is left breathless because he has to race through everything else, basically, that has happened in the Champions League on Wednesday.
Well, the good news, Dean, is tonight I'm only doing 4 of them.
Phew.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with Bayern, who won 4-0 against Club Brugge, and their run of being supremely comfortable in games back on track after a slightly more difficult one in the Clasico at the weekend with a comfortable win over Club Brugge. And what I thought was interesting at the start of this is that Vincent Kompany started with Rafael Guerreiro at right back and Connie Lima at left back, which is kind of flip side to how you'd imagine it, which was kind of an intriguing capacity. I'll say this, it worked, right? And I'll come back to Conrad Lima a little bit later on. But first, I want to talk about Lennart Karl, who scored his first competitive goal for Bayern Munich, 17 years old, and an absolute stunner to open things up here. He carries slaloms through a few bodies in the midfield and then slams one into the top corner. A wonderful goal. At 17 years and 242 days old, he became Bayern's youngest ever goal scorer in the Champions League. And the record he surpassed was Jamal Musiala's, which I thought was sweet because he was wearing Jamal Musiala's number 42, or old number 42, on the back of his shirt. Musiala moving to the number 10 after Leroy Sané left in the summer, and it was Lennart Karl that picked up that 42 shirt. The way he moves, that kind of intricacy, the low center of gravity, there's a real element of seeing what Jamal Musiala has done there and being like, wow, okay, this kid's pretty special. So one to keep an eye on, and I think that given his performance over the course of this game, it wasn't, I was going to say 90 minutes there, it wasn't 90 minutes. He came off in the second half. They substituted him and Harry Kane at the same time. Later on, you're like, oh, okay, that's nice. One at the start of their career, one a little bit later on in their career, but two players who were absolutely imperative to what Bayern did tonight. And it was a mark of something quite special. We've talked a lot about the fact that Bayern felt a little bit light in that number 10 area. I don't know if they feel light anymore because this kid looks absolutely unbelievable. There's been a lot of calls from Bayern fans for Lennart Karl to get an opportunity and for him to be able to show what he can do. And he very much did that. Actually, he nearly got an assist seconds after this one. He tees up Pavlovic, more incredible running. And Pavlovic, it's saved by the goalkeeper, but really, really impressive. It didn't take long, though, for Bayern to double that advantage. Harry Kane stealing in at the far post. I mean, I've no idea how Club Brugge decided they were going to let Harry Kane run in unmarked to the back coast to tap in after Conrad Lima had squared it. 5 goals now in the Champions League already for Harry Kane. And they make it look so incredibly easy when they do things like that. And actually, Bayern sort of into cruise control by this point. Luis Diaz as a third. He fires one off the inside of the crossbar, past the goalkeeper. One of those ones where the power has just clearly taken the keeper completely by surprise. A really, really filthy strike in many ways from Luis Diaz. And he now has 7 goals and 4 assists in 12 games since joining Bayern Munich in the summer. So almost a goal involvement per game. And in an era where Liverpool have really struggled to find those moments, and we spoke about Luis Diaz and what he brought to the table from a Liverpool perspective, and why it was a bit strange that Liverpool fans were pleased to see him go. I mean, he's marking his introduction to this Bayern side in some style. He is such a glorious footballer. And look, it's a team where Harry Kane is gobbling up a lot of the goal involvements, right? Not only in terms of scoring them, but the goals that he doesn't, he tends to assist. And Luis Diaz adding a real kind of second foil to that. And there's a little bit of the two of them combining in general. They were just so good. 12 out of 12 in all competitions now for Bayern Munich. And they just didn't let up whatsoever. And I thought that what was interesting was it wasn't like they didn't step off the gas in the second half, but it was a different performance. But they were just so controlled. And look, Club Brugge tried to kind of take risks, and Bayern just completely and utterly kept them at bay. And Conrad Lima then streams through the middle of midfield. Great work from him. Has his shot blocked. The ball rolls across the goal, and Nicholas Jackson, who's come on as a substitute for Harry Kane, adds it to make it 4. I was a little bit surprised that Bayern didn't go for a 5th one, because the 5th goal would have sent them back top of the table. But alas, it was incredibly comfortable. And Lennart Karl, the breakout star of the day, really, really impressive, seeing what he could do and the way that he looks so comfortable and the players look so comfortable passing to him is something we always talk about on the show. It's not just a young player being able to get on the ball and do things. It's whether other players, more senior players, are willing to give them the ball and allow them to do their thing, knowing that it's secure with them. It was pretty secure with Lennart Carr. So I'm excited to see more of him over the course of this season. Vincent Kompany celebrating that new contract with Bayern that takes him through now to 2029 with a big win over Club Brugge, who are no mugs and have been really impressive, I think, in this competition so far, but just made to look incredibly ordinary by this exceptional Bayern unit, who changed a few things. And what comes out of that switch at the fullbacks? Well, Konrad Laimer gets 2 assists and maybe could be credited with a third. It's a deflected shot that lands at the feet of Nicholas Jackson to add the 4th one. But it wouldn't be unreasonable to give Konrad Laimer a hat-trick of assists in this game. And a big win for Bayern. Very, very comfortable. And they just look so secure in their own skin right now. Vincent Kompany producing some pretty special stuff, I think, with this Bayern team. And we're starting to see the new generation breakthrough as well, which is very, very exciting. We will go from Munich to Lisbon, where Sporting won 2-1 over Marseille. At first, and I will be candidly honest with you, I looked at this and was like, why on earth are Sporting playing in white and pink when they're at home against a Marseille side that play either in white and blue or just blue? But I am told, and I understand now, that it was a breast cancer awareness month and that Sporting are wearing this kit at home and away when they can for the entire month, which is an incredibly worthy cause. So I had to drop my anger at why they were wearing some sort of, change kit at home, for the fact that it's for a very good cause. So fair enough from Sporting. And actually, they started this game really well. But after about 15 minutes in it, Marseille started to get a grip on the game. And Igor Paixão, who is Marseille's record signing, had 2 really good opportunities. It was third time lucky for him because he collects this ball, crossfield pass from Aubameyang on the left-hand side, and then curls this beauty into the far corner. And Paixão, after not necessarily a tricky start, I think that would be way too much of a stretch, but after kind of spending the first couple of weeks under De Zerbi, trying to get his feet and making sure he's a first teamer within this Marseille setup. Bear in mind, this is Marseille side who are top of Liga, above PSG at the moment. He's worked his way into this side and he's really starting to show his capability and what he's bringing to the table, why they decided to make him their record signing in the summer. And Sporting felt they were struggling, I thought, for the right balance. They had this element where in the first sort of 20 minutes, and especially in the 10 minutes after the goal, I thought they really wanted to press Marseille high. And we know what De Zerbi sides are like. When they are pressed really high, they find ways of playing through it, and they started to exploit those gaps in a different way. They cooled off it a little bit after about 30 minutes, and it felt like they added a bit more control at that point. But the turning point of this game comes on the stroke of halftime, because the ball is played across in the box, and Emerson Palmieri, who has been booked about 5 minutes before, goes over from a challenge, and the referee gives a penalty. Now, it didn't look like a penalty at first glance, but you've seen decisions like this given, and there's a little bit of a touch on the ball. So the referee goes over to the monitor and he has a look at it. And when you see it in slow-mo, what's happened is the ball has been taken and Emerson has trod his foot into the floor and thrown himself to the ground. So the referee comes back onto the pitch and decides not only is it no penalty from a Marseille perspective, but actually that he's going to give Emerson a second yellow card for simulation, and he is sent off at that moment. And from 15, 20 seconds beforehand, if Sporting fans had seen the penalty given and decided they were going to go out for a Super Bock, I would have been like, yeah, fair enough. I know, Super Bock is a pause a bit, but if you're going to go out and have a sacrilege, let's say, that that would have been perfectly reasonable. But suddenly the game has flipped on its head. And actually in the second half, Sporting really turned up the heat against 10 men. And after a few near misses, a couple of nice moments, Giovanni Quenda I thought was excellent down the right-hand side, trying to make things happen. They finally found the equaliser. Good from Trincao, who forces this turnover in the opposition half, and he gets the ball to Luis Suarez, who was playing against his former side in Marseille here. And I thought fought like a demon throughout the entirety of the night. He gives the ball to Pedro Gonçalves, and that then ends up working its way through to Jenny Katamo, who started home. The goal was originally given as offside, but on second viewing and from VAR, very much onside, just after Jenny Katamo had come off the bench. So a nice moment in terms of a substitute coming on and making a real difference. But Sporting were really on top by this point. And it was kind of a question of whether they were going to be able to find that winner, considering they were playing against 10 men. They had about 30 minutes or so, 20 minutes or so to go and find the winner. And they do. That comes in somewhat fortuitous circumstances. Alisson Santos, another one off the bench, cutting in off that left flank and firing the ball sort of into the body of Benjamin Pavard, and it loops off the floor and over Geronimo Rui in the Marseille goal. And now, obviously, Marseille can count themselves a little bit unlucky in this one. But I do think that if this doesn't go in, it's probably a penalty in terms of the way that Benjamin Pavard has his hands out from his body. So yes and no in terms of the unfortunate nature of it. And look, a big win for Sporting, who are okay this season. I think in general, it's not been as dominant as we've seen in recent seasons. Obviously, back-to-back Portuguese champions, but Porto have been the ones setting the pace in the Primeira. So actually, the fact that they found a big win here over the Liga leaders at the moment, yes, it took a moment of madness from Emerson to swing the game in their favour, but you've still got to take advantage of those situations. And I thought they did so really, really well. So Sporting, a big win. And doing so in that pink and white kit, which is for a very, very good cause as well. So happy days all round, and the José Alvalade fans going home very, very happy after that one. All right, that's 2 done. Dean, you're actually going to take us through Galatasaray's 3-1 win over Bodo Glimt.
Yeah, I mean, I watched this one by accident, to be honest, because I was doing some other work, and I realised the Galatasaray game had started. So like 2 minutes in, I flicked it on. I was like, oh, cool. I can actually watch this while I'm doing this work. And almost immediately, Osimhen scored. It was 1-0 to Galatasaray. And then so I became more and more distracted by the game to the extent that I just watched most of it. Mate, I just cannot stop thinking about Osimhen. I don't really watch the guy anymore. I don't watch Turkish football. I haven't seen Osimhen play properly for ages. Oh my God. He is so good still.
Special.
Like, he's 26 years old. I suddenly started having to like research everything that's gone on because I'm like, hang on, remind me what's happened here. Why is he at Galatasaray? I was like, oh my goodness, they paid 75 million euros to get Osimhen. Like, he's 26. Like, what is he doing? He's kind of hiding in plain sight at Galatasaray because like he's out there playing. He's absolutely balling, but no one really watches them. So he's just like cracking on. He was so good. He should have scored way more than the 2 goals that he ended up with here. Definitely should have had a hat-trick. But he doesn't just play, mate. He hunts. He hunts down that ball. He hunts down chances. And all I kept thinking was, everyone's talking about Haaland at the moment in English football, right? And how he's on this goal glut at the moment, this goal rush, and is incomparable really to anybody else in the game. I was like, he's not incomparable, is he? Because Osimhen is the other guy that can do this. He's the only other guy who's slightly in that ruthless, clinical machine mode that Haaland can get into. And I just cannot believe that nobody's actually on a, bigger stage, I guess, like in Europe, gone for Osimhen. Now, I know that a lot of them were scared off by his wages, and people didn't particularly like his attitude towards the transfer. For example, Man United did look at it and they found out he was going to want 400 grand a week or whatever. And if they weren't willing to go to that, then he wasn't really interested. And I get it. Like, you want a player that wants to play for you. But do you know what? I think as Man United, I'd have been like, should we just go for it? Because when you watch him play like this, you're just like, you're just left in awe, to be honest. He is unbelievable. He is as good of a number 9 as you could ever get hold of. And I just loved watching him today.
Look, I mean, I think the kind of results speak for themselves in the Champions League. He misses the first game against Eintracht Frankfurt. They lose 5-1. He starts the game against Liverpool. He scores. They win 1-0. He starts the game against Bodo Glimt. He scores 2. They win 3-1. Like, he's been the difference maker in both of those. And suddenly Galatasaray are looking at this saying, yeah, I think we can qualify out of this one. You look at what's left for them in the competition, and top of the league in Turkey as well. And he's already flying in that regard. Yeah. 2 goals already from a domestic perspective as well. So like an unbelievable footballer. And Bodo Glimt, as we've seen over the European competitions down the years, are a really difficult side to break down. Admittedly, yes, they are easier to play away from home than they are at home. Yeah. But still for Gala to just put them away in the way that they did, I thought tonight was very impressive. And Osimhen remains a very, very special player and perhaps one of the most underrated and underappreciated strikers, I think, in the modern era. Just been sensational everywhere he has gone, every single place he's gone.
Absolutely bizarre. But yeah, I know this does seem disrespectful towards Galatasaray, but I just cannot fathom that at 26 years old, that's where he's playing right now. When you watch this, you're just like, this is crazy, and they've got to make the most of it. Look, Bodo Glimt did have chances. Jens Hagen missed a great opportunity to get them back into the game. He somehow steers the ball the wrong side of the post. So when their big chances came, when the game was still alive, they just couldn't really take them. By the time they did score, they were already 3-0 down. They've lost the game 3-1. But yeah, it was an eye-opener for me, mate. I'm really glad I stumbled across the game and was able to take it in, because their next Champions League game is against Ajax. And do you know what? I think I might tune in for that one as well.
Yeah, well, I think they might win that one as well, given what we've seen from Ajax today, although Ajax might have a new manager by that point, considering the way that it's gone. But yeah, a really good win. And this is a very, very good Galatasaray side that people are going to remain sleeping on, but don't. There you go. Some advice from us here at Ranks FC. Let me take you over to the other early kickoff where Athletic won 3-1 against Qarabağ. And you know what? I thought this was going to be a really difficult game for Athletic. Qarabağ have been really impressive in their 2 wins in the competition so far, obviously coming from behind against Benfica and then seeing off Copenhagen last time. But they started this one really well as well. And Athletic had to dig really deep. It's been not a particularly comfortable period for Athletic. They drew 0-0 with Elche at the weekend, and they looked incredibly toothless in that. And when they went 1-0 down really, really early on in this game, I was a little bit concerned that they weren't going to be able to find the firepower to actually make it happen. But at the Cathedral, in front of that San Mamés crowd, which is so incredibly vociferous and was so red and white across the entirety of the crowd, they made it happen. And there was a little bit moment of European football history in this game. I read this afterwards, so shouts out to the lads at BBC Sport who pointed this out, I saw. But Leandro Andrade plays for this Qarabağ side. Has been pretty instrumental in their 2 wins so far. He gave them the lead after just 48 seconds. Ridiculous defending from an Athletic perspective. Laporte kicks the ball into Aitor Paredes, and it ends up sort of looping back towards Andrade, who fires it home across the goalkeeper. And he became the first player in a major European football competition to score in the first minute of 3 separate games. Now, I feel that they've come across the UEFA competitions, not just in the Champions League, but really impressive. And also, it's been a good kind of couple of weeks for Andrade because he plays for Cap Verde as well, who obviously qualified for their first ever World Cup in the international break. So nice moment for him in what has been a good month. But actually, Athletic cranked it up, right? And actually, the way that they went about their business, starting to create chances and open them up, they lost Iñaki Williams relatively early in this game. And at that moment, you're looking at it and saying, this is a side that's been struggling to score. It doesn't feel like Oyhan Sanset's been on his best performances since coming back from the injury. Nico Williams remains a threat, but hasn't been as effective in recent weeks. You're kind of wondering where the goal is going to come from. But it comes from Gorka Gurzeta, who's back playing as the number 9 in this team, which is nice to see. He's wearing Nico Williams' old number 11 shirt as well. So I do enjoy it when the Williams brothers flank him on either side, because it's 9, 10, 11, not necessarily in the preferred order, as I would say, but a Williams on either side of Gurzeta. This comes after Iñaki's come off, but he is let through on goal. Weird defending from Qarabağ, to be honest. Both centre-backs split, and it's just good timing of run, but equally you can't give someone that much space. And he tucks it home past the goalkeeper. And at that moment, it's like all Athletic, and the halftime whistle is starting to get closer and closer. They force a couple of other opportunities. Sanset should do better with one. Berenguer should do better with one as well. But they come back after the break and they remained very much in the ascendancy, is probably how I would describe it. And the moment came where there was a big missed opportunity from Paredes when a whipped cross comes in, sort of a second ball after a corner, and it sort of bounces up towards him. Instead of just sort of forcing it into the goal, he lets it hit his chest and it goes over the bar, and it looked easier to score. But any sort of worries about that were released when Robert Navarro scored an absolutely gorgeous strike, top corner, after coming on for Nico Williams as well. You know, a finish that Nico would have been very, very proud of. A really, really good goal from him, and a really nice moment because the crowd goes absolutely ballistic for him, you know, in terms of coming off the bench and making a real difference. It didn't end there. Karabakh probably should have equalised, and the ball's lifted over Unai Simon really nicely at the other end of the pitch, and it's actually Yuri Bashish who clears it off the line. I think it's Kashchuk who, you know, would have got the equaliser at that point. And the ball goes up to the other end of the pitch, and Guruzzetta scores this brilliant first-time volley on the spin that beats the keeper with just the kind of speed of thought. I think it is one of those goals where he catches it on the volley. I don't think the keeper thinks a strike is coming in that early, and it seals the game. Nice moment. Guruzzetta starting to come back to the fore from an athletic perspective, and a big win for them, not just their first win in the Champions League this season, but it's been a bit of an iffy period from an athletic perspective. And actually for them to get a big win here against the Karabakh side who've put some serious opposition to the sword already in this competition, but also to come from behind and score 3 goals at home, you know, in front of that San Mamés crowd. A big moment for them as well. So hopefully this is the keystone that Athletic can now kick on from, because it was a performance where they created a load of chances and actually converted some of them for the first time in a little while. So more power to them, Alpo Athletic as ever, but a big win for them. And finally, as yesterday, we'll finish with the 0-0, which was Atalanta 0, Slavia Prague 0. As you can imagine, you know, Atalanta would have expected to win this with their recent European pedigree and what we've seen from them in recent years. Even in a season that hasn't been brilliant, they remain one of the few unbeaten teams domestically across Europe's big 5 leagues. I think it's just Atalanta and Bayern Munich, but they've drawn far too many games already. Now, there's an element of that. It's obviously Gasperini, you know, moving on, and Ivan Juric, who is a Gasperini disciple, but someone who I think we all had serious question marks on after the period at Roma, and then obviously at Southampton as well, taking over. He's done a few very good things. He managed to reintegrate Ademola Lookman after his sort of desire to leave was made very public in the summer, and bring him back into the squad. He started in this one, and there were some nice moments. Scamacca back from a big injury. I thought De Ketelaere was excellent over the course of the first half in particular, and Atalanta should have scored 3 or 4 times, I think, in the first half alone. But as the game went on, they sort of wilted, and Slavia had their own opportunities, I thought, in the second half. A couple of good saves from Karnaseki, but also just it felt like Atalanta's maybe not desire, but, you know, ability to go and win a game and belief and confidence in their own ability to go and score faded as the game went on. And considering the crowd in Bergamo and considering how kind of passionate that fan base is, incredible tifo before the game from the fan base, basically just asking them to like rekindle the fire in many ways. They came out hot, but the spark never caught, if you will. If you'll pardon the analogy, the spark never caught, and it ended up very much whimpering out as the rain fell. And it felt like Slavia kind of finished in a way that they'd be comfortable with the draw, with the point. They would have looked at this game, Atalanta, and said this was one of the bankers that they would have won at home. It hasn't turned out that way. And yeah, whilst Scamacca's return is a nice thing, he missed a few big opportunities, including this header in the second half, which he just has to do better with. There are brief moments for Atalanta, and I think there have been in recent games. They drew with Lazio at the weekend as well. But it just feels like the attacking flair that was so prominent and so present under Gasperini is starting to go out a little bit, and they don't have that self-belief that when one opportunity goes missing, they'll find another one. I think that was really, really clear over the course of the evening, and the way that it just sort of whimpered out towards the end, I think is probably a marker of exactly where Atalanta are right now. So yeah, not the best of games, not the most entertaining of games, and actually one that I probably wouldn't go and watch the highlights of.
Yeah, very good. Nice one, Jack. You have kept us all informed on those games that we just couldn't get our heads around this week. So thank you very much, mate.
Yeah, I mean, again, do not watch the Atalanta Slavia Prague highlights. There's absolutely nothing to see there, apart from Scamacca coming back and spooning a header over the bar. But alas, we can leave that one for another day, which means that we're pretty much wrapped here on Ranks FC. So all that's left for me to do is say thank you very, very much to Mr. Dean Jones.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you very much to everyone who has listened over the last 2 days to Champions League Takeaway here on Ranks FC. A little bit of notice. There's no truth on on Friday because Sam's been sick this week. Wish the rank god well. He's got the new form of COVID, I feel. He's away next week, but Doogie and I are going to sit down. It's very trendy. Doogie and I are going to sit down and talk about Nottingham Forest and what that's going to look like under Sean Dyche. So we'll be back with you on The Truth next week. But for now, from us, thank you so much for listening to this Champions League takeaway, and we'll see you all at the start of next week. Thanks a million, Rank Squad. Take it easy. Peace.